Robert's ShedLog, 29th of March 2020. Hello, I'm Robert and welcome to my shed. So this week I have three things to discuss. I have the story so far of making the workbench, what I've been doing the past week, which is basically throwing away a whole lot of work, and then I'm going to discuss three new joints and why I picked one over the other. So last week yesterday I heard an expression in my research which said break it till you make it, and I quite like that phrase. So this piece of wood here is the leg that I've been working on for the past week. It's reasonably well made apart from a few problems, but I think the problems are mounting up to the point where I can't use this piece anymore. I'm going to have to make a new one. So problem one, I cut this on the miter saw, which I use as a chop saw like all the others, except being a miter saw it got a 3-degree angle, and there's a slight chamfer at the top there, which means I'm going to have to cut this and all the other legs to make it flat. Not the end of the world, but it's just a bit annoying. I then cut this, is a hipped through mortise. I did these two lines with a tenon saw, chiseled out the rest, did some slots to make it easier to chisel out the rest, and did this coming from both sides with a hammer and chisel. That was a few days' work, actually, or a few evenings' work. I've slightly messed up the sizing. I should have gone a bit further on the hip. I can do that. I can fix that. It's cutting wood away that should have been cut away. But the big problem is simply the amount of wood I've taken out. I followed the instructions for a hipped mortise and tenon, and yeah, for a peg through mortise and tenon, and that worked fine, except I got to one part in the blog post that said it is assumed that the piece being mortise is large in all dimensions. So basically I shouldn't have taken out all that material. Plus, because I'm working in new wood, I can't rely on the tenon being in contact with both this piece and this piece. So having taken off about 1/6 to 1/12 of the entire material of the wood, I've now got much less load capacity. And even if there was a piece that was reliably fixed into this hole, like this, that would be holding material across the grain, which wouldn't be very strong. I then cut out this through tenon, and I worked out the way you cut a through tenon is you start from both sides. I forgot, I started from one side and went through. I figured if I broke through I could use that as a sizing point to reference out the rest of the sizing. It was an experiment. Don't think you can see it, but the wood there actually split and started to peel off. You can just about see the two lines there, hopefully. And I hammered it back in place, but that's not particularly good. There's a bit here that's wandered off towards the edge. There's a bit of tear out, which again means it won't make a good contact with the tenon, unless I get really good at cutting the tenon, shaping the tenon. So yeah, I'm basically throwing this piece in the bin. Mostly because of this joint. I need a new version of this joint, and I've got 3 new joints to show you now. So I need a joint to replace this, because yeah. In my research in the last week, I found 3 options that might be usable. These are on the wall behind me. First one, the strongest option, is the through dovetail. That means you take a dovetail cut in here. Instead of cutting a regular square, you just cut a narrower opening with a wider base, with certain calculations on angles and things. You do either 1 or 2 tails, probably in this size, and that will just knock straight through. So it's easy to cut. You can do the whole thing using only a tenon saw, maybe tidy up with a chisel, but no through joints with chisels. That's really strong this way, which is the way that it needs to be strong in, but it does have a slight issue. Normally when you're using seasoned wood through dovetail, you cut the dovetail and you cut the pin, the pin board. Sorry. You cut the dovetail pin and you cut the pin board. Now, this piece is going to, if you're talking about seasonal wood variation, when going from winter to summer, the wood dries out a little bit, and this shrinks a little bit and this shrinks a little bit, both along the width of the wood, not the grain. When this shrinks, it makes this peg smaller. When this shrinks, it makes this hole larger. So this tightens it up, this loosens it up, and it kind of balances out. However, I'm dealing with new wood, and for new wood, there's another factor at play. This will still shrink and this will still shrink, but the extent is larger. So this will shrink this way, and that means the angle, instead of being like this, will be like this. And this will shrink this way, which means the angle, instead of being like this, will be like this. So this makes the angle narrower, and this makes the angle steeper. That means you've got a badly cut joint, effectively. The wood will move into the joint more in one place than another, and you'll get in the corners of the joint, you'll get significant stress points, which is what you don't want when the wood is drying out, because that will just split the wood. I don't think this is worth trying. It's the easiest one to make, it's the strongest, but I don't think it's usable in this case. There is another negative point in that this isn't very strong front to back, weakest top to tail. That's top is that in the workbench tail is that in the length of the bench. And that's because as this piece moves this way, this one could stay in the same place. It might fall out eventually, if there's a lot of racking movement, as you would have if you were sawing something on the vise, for instance. But it's the strongest face to back where it needs the strength. Face is the side facing you, and back is further away, so that's widthwise on the bench. So the next option I looked at is the fox-wedged mortise and tenon. Now the fox-wedged mortise and tenon, also called a blind wedge mortise and tenon, is a simple blind mortise and tenon joint. You take your tenon, you hammer it into a hole called a mortise, and at the start of it, that's a reasonably strong joint. You can make mortise and tenon joints without gluing. They are relatively strong, as long as you get the dimensions exactly right. But again, new wood shrinks. This will shrink this way and this way. This will shrink this way and this way. Shrinkage in this way isn't too bad because it will kind of even out, but shrinkage this way is going to mean less wood in contact, and shrinkage this way is going to mean it will kind of fall out. You can make a fox-wedged tenon with or without a shoulder. Either way, you drill 2 holes for strain relief. These aren't part of the joint, they stop the wood from splitting. And you cut 2 slots into the wood. When you hammer the tenon into the mortise, you drive 2 wedges into the slots. These wedges are between 3 and 8 degrees, depending on various factors. And there's also an opening. You also make the mortise slightly wider on both sides by the same angle. So that means the mortise will go into the hole and flare out, creating effectively a dovetail joint, but not a through joint in any dimension. So you can't pull this apart. It is a permanent joint. It's much stronger than an ordinary pegged joint, but it's a permanent fix. So I basically have the 2 sides of the bench that I wouldn't be able to take apart again, which is okay. If I want to move the bench, so if I move house for instance, I can take that apart and ship them out, and just keep those H-shaped pieces that will transport like that. So that's not too big a negative. This incidentally was used for battle axes and war hammers. These are medieval weapons that use incredible amounts of force. You would cast this shape into the head, whatever it was the axe or the hammer, and you'd use this joint to attach the shaft or the handle. And you could then, as long as it's properly seasoned oak, etc., you could then whack it at great force against seriously heavy objects, and they would withstand it. So this can take a real bashing, that's all I'm trying to say. It's a serious joint. I've seen some people online going, they don't think it's very useful, but it really is. It's a glue-free joint that will withstand almost everything, except shrinkage. The problem is, when this shrinks, this relies entirely on the wedges to great pressure. When this wood shrinks, you can hammer this in home again, which will broaden it out even further. But to do that, you need to hammer the two legs of the bench towards each other, and they're fixed at the top by the bench top, so that's going to cause legs to do that, and that's going to make the bench less stable. So tightening these, keeping these joints tight is going to be virtually impossible. There's also a risk. If you have a piece of wood and you want to split it, you want to use a tool called a hatchet, a type of a hand axe. All axes have a wedge shape on the point, and you take your axe and you whack it against the piece of wood along the grain. The wedge drives itself into the grain and causes the grain to split apart. That split runs down the wood and splits it. That's what we're doing here. We're driving wedges into the top of the wood. That will cause the wood to split. We put these holes in to try and stop it, so that at least this split doesn't run all the way down. But we're still bending this wood quite significantly, up to 8 degrees. And that's going to cause a lot of stress here, on the corners of the hips, or here on the edge of the corner of the shoulders on hips, and here on the edge of the tenon itself, and that could cause the whole thing to split apart. So again, I love the fox-wedged mortise tenon. I want to use it at some point, but not today. I want to use it in old wood, where I'm not having to worry about non-seasonal shrinkage. We then come on to the drawbored mortise tenon. This is the weakest of the 3 joints that I have found in my research, and it's used for a number of reasons. This is the joint they used to use in the 17th century a lot, particularly when they're making things out of new wood. Now that's nice because I'm making things out of rough sawn timber, which isn't green wood. It's wood that's been sawn off, stacked up on a shelf somewhere until it can be sold, and then sold. So it could be 6 months old, it could be 12 months old, it could be 2 years old, it could have been cut down just before I bought it, about a month ago. And for that, most of that time it's been stored outside, and I bought it in the winter, so it's going to be fairly high moisture content, and it's going to have some shrinkage. Yeah. Now, the advantages of this are that it tightens as it dries, as the wood dries. As the wood dries, this gets smaller, and basically the pegged hole gets tighter. I should probably say, this is an ordinary blind mortise and tenon with a peg through it, and a little bit of a twist. This works better on larger joints, and I have a really big joint to make. Normally you're talking about cutting joints into ½ an inch of wood. I'm using 2 inches of wood. That's, instead of 1 centimetre, it's 15 centimetres. ½ inch a centimetre, very, very, very roughly. Usually these 2 pegs, I've only drawn 1. And it has other advantage if you get a hanging peg at the end of it. As long as the peg's small enough, you can hang things on top of it. Now, a trick to a drawbored mortise and tenon is when you cut the hole all the way through the leg, you cut a corresponding hole in the tenon. The hole in the tenon is typically 1/16 of an inch further this way. Now, I don't know if you can read my chalk writing here, but I've got 3/32 of an inch offset. I've written 1.5mm, which is 1/16 of an inch, because I haven't updated it for this. It's about 2mm. But the reason for the offset is as you hammer the peg home, and you chamfer the end of the peg so it can get through the hole, the peg will twist through the mortise, through the tenon, back through the mortise again. That twisting action does two things. It draws the tenon into the mortise, so the joint remains firm against this side of the wood that I haven't drawn. So this line here will be absolutely precise for years to come, even if the wood moves. And secondly, it works the other way. The tenon trying to put itself out holds the peg in place. So that joint is solid, it will not move. The only way you can get rid of it is to drill out the peg, or hammer out the peg. So that's the one I decided to go for in the end. Over the last week I've been working on various bits and pieces. This is a new leg that I've been making up. You can see on the side there is a mortise hole for the Drawbored Mortise Tenon. I've also discovered I have this 3/4 inch dowel and a 3/4 inch bit that I can use to make holes. The dowel is balsa wood, which isn't ideally I want a good strong hardwood. Balsa wood, although it's technically a hardwood, it's actually one of the softest woods you can get, at least dense anyway. So I don't think it's going to be strong enough. But I'll try it for the initial assembly, and if it doesn't work, it's standard size, 3/4 inch 19mm. I can just buy another one. I do have 12mm dowel, but that's rather useless because I don't have any way of making a 12mm hole. The biggest wood bit I have is 10mm, and the smallest saw bit I have is a 16mm. I also have a 20mm bit, but that's not really useful. So yeah, this will be what I'm using, 19mm dowel and 19mm bit. It's certainly 3/4 inches, 19mm and 5 microns. So I think we'll be okay in terms of sizing. This incidentally I had because I was using it to make dogs. So the dog sits in the hole like this. Sits in the hole like this, and you can use that to hold things onto the bench. That's what dog holes are for, in case you're wondering. This is the face vise mounted on the face vise supports. It's a little bit heavy, but I'll show you here. The face vise supports are particularly annoying pieces of wood which are exactly sized to take the bolts that hold the face vise in place. This will sit on the top rail in a cutout. There's a video on my making of these, which I'll be putting up in the next week. So that's exciting news. Yeah, so that's where we're up to. That's kind of it for ShedLog this week. I'm going to try and cut some of this mortise out. Maybe I'll do a nice speeded up video of me doing that. And then, apart from that, I'll see you next week. Ta-ta! Now, if I show you over here, and take you down a little bit. Ooh, blurry. This may have to be a cut.